Hi guys, it's Savage Joy here on Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined with the amazing Congressman Ro Khanna from California. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Even though technical difficulties ensued last week, thank you for giving us another try.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad, as a congressman from Silicon Valley, I felt embarrassed about the difficulties last week, so I'm glad I figured it out.
I'm pretty sure it was my end. So for those of you guys who, for some reason, wouldn't know, Ro is he's a lawyer who went to Yale, and then he turned U.S. representative for California's 17th congressional district. And you're a fellow Pennsylvanian, which is where I am, so that's exciting. So I saw you at the People Summit back in June, and you were giving seminars about net neutrality. And that was back before so many people were even discussing it. So you kind of exposed me to a lot of it. I didn't know much about it at all. So since we did have the vote last week, what is net neutrality really just not a way to silence we the people? Doesn't it just come down to censorship?
It does. I mean, think about your show or the show we're on. Imagine if now you get charged more for accessing Facebook or for accessing video streaming and streaming video. I mean, that is really the world that we're potentially going to live in, with people charging more for every service. So you get charged a certain amount to check email, a certain amount to browse the net, a certain amount to stream video. And it's going to hurt. It's not going to hurt the big companies, the NBCs or ABCs or CNNs, but it's going to hurt ordinary citizens and small companies and entrepreneurs and the middle class. And so it's really, like so much of the Republican agenda, a giveaway to big companies, to telecom companies, at the expense of ordinary individuals.
Absolutely. Why is the vote only up to 5 people? How did these 5 people get picked, and why only them?
Well, that's a great question. They are appointed by the president. In fact, Ajit Pai was appointed by Barack Obama, believe it or not. He was Mitch McConnell's pick. I'm sure President Obama regrets that now, but he was sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing, and no one realized how much of a radical agenda he had. So the president appoints these folks, and they're unelected, and they're basically 5 individuals who have say over the entire internet in the United States. But Congress can act too, and so can the courts. And so we are ready to challenge this in the courts. I think there's no way any reasonable judge can uphold Pai's decision, which says that the FCC should basically allow discrimination on the internet. And Congress is going to take action to try to repeal the Pai decision.
I saw that there's a bunch of states, attorney generals who have signed on to do a lawsuit against it. Is what they're doing legal, though? Do we have any real recourse?
We do, because the Pai order is so extreme. If Pai had just overturned what Tom Wheeler, who Obama appointed, did, he'd have maybe a case that he was acting within his authority. But he basically gutted net neutrality. He's going back. This is what's important for people to realize. He's not just reversing what Obama did and going back before 2015. He's going back before 2005. Ever since we've known the internet, frankly, there has been the presumption that you can't discriminate against content.
Absolutely. California is on the list of the states who are saying they are going to take this to court. Is that something you yourself are going to be involved in?
I will support that effort. I mean, I'm in Congress, so I'll have to be involved through amicus briefs. I mean, supporting friend of the court briefs. But I definitely think that the state should take this to court, and nonprofits should take this to court and say, look, we've never had a world where you were allowed to discriminate on the internet, where AT&T or Verizon can just say, look, I don't like someone's views. I don't like uh, their being a threat to my competition or competition with me, and I'm going to stop showing their content or deny them access to the internet or charge them more.
Absolutely. And I think, as us being burners, we saw everything we went through in 2016, all the ways we were stifled and everything like that. And that kind of fears us in the future. Are we going to be shut off again now legally from being able to share progressive ideals, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think that Bernie, I mean, I'd be curious your perspective. My sense is the reason he did so well is because of the internet and because of social media. And he was shut out for the longest time from traditional media. Now they cover him because he has to be covered. He's the most popular politician in the United States. But back when he started, he didn't have the social media support. Wouldn't have made it without social media support. And net neutrality will make it so much harder for programs like yours, where you may have to pay more to be able to have a program like this, and it's going to give an advantage to traditional media, to the CNNs and MSNBCs and NBCs. They'll be fine. But individuals who want to have their own forms of communication are going to get nickeled and dimed and find it much harder to operate and work in this new world.
Absolutely. You are, speaking of Bernard, you're an original co-sponsor of his bill to make college affordable. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great plan. Basically, anyone who makes under $125,000 would get to go to college, public college, for free, and it's paid for by a financial transaction tax. Let's tax this Wall Street speculation. A small fraction of tax would pay for free college for everyone under $125,000. And I was also pleased that Senator Sanders, had put out on social media a video I did on net neutrality. So I have great respect for him, and of course his vision on debt-free college, on Medicare for all, and a financial transaction tax, on being a lead voice on net neutrality, on being a voice for renewable energy and restraint in foreign policy. I think he provides a positive moral vision for the party.
Absolutely. And I got to say, not just because you're here, I have to say that video he shared of you, that few minutes on the net neutrality, that was the most educational, concise video. It broke it down in like 3 minutes, everything everyone needed to know. It was just a really good learning tool.
Well, so say that. And I appreciated Senator Sanders really being so outspoken on this. It's an issue he really believes in. I think because he saw the power of grassroots organizing on the internet in his own campaign and how important that is for resisting traditional power, for overcoming special interests, for being able to fund campaigns without going to traditional wealthy 1% donors. And so he understands, I think, the democratizing power of the internet and wants to make sure that that isn't reversed.
Absolutely. And I think, going back to that, touching on that 1%er, you founded something that's called the No PAC Caucus in Congress. And you're currently only one of 6 members who refuse super PAC donations.
I refuse all political action committee donations. So other members, I respect them, but they take money from corporations, and these corporations can get $5,000, $10,000 a cycle. I don't. I take all my money from individuals, and I don't take a single dime from lobbyists or from political action committees. And that has to be the future. We need to ban a political action committee from giving money.
100%. We've definitely learned that everything goes back to that. Pretty much everything. Who's elected, how people vote, just everything. Our world would be very different right now if it didn't come down to money in so many respects. Um, you're one of very few people who have called out your colleagues to adopt a more progressive platform. So we appreciate that. Besides net neutrality, what's something you're fervently working on at the moment, something you're super passionate about right now?
Well, Sherrod Brown and I have a bill to give every American to corporate executives and people who own stock. And basically, because what's going to happen with this corporate tax cut is people are going to buy, companies are going to buy back their stock. That means if you own stock, you're going to be richer. And if you get dividends, you're going to be richer. Well, it turns out only 15% of Americans own stock. What about the 85% of other Americans? Instead of this type of tax bill, what we should have done is said, we're going to expand the earned income tax credit. We're going to give a raise for $10,000, up to $10,000 for everyone working under, making under 75 or 100,000. If you're a nurse and making 50 grand, you'd get $10,000 back at the end of the year from the federal government. If you're a auto mechanic, you'd get making 70 grand, you'd get about 10,000 back. And we could have done that for the same amount of money that we are giving tax breaks to corporations. And if we had given the money to the working class, to the middle class, to reward people who work, they would have spent that money. That would lead to more jobs. That would lead to a revitalization of the communities. So I think the Democrats, instead of talking about all the deficits and saying that Trump's plan is going to expose the deficits and we shouldn't be spending, because that's buying into their frame when you talk about deficits, we should be talking about growing the economy through bottom-up economics, the type that Stephanie Kelton and Robert Reich and Paul Krugman support, that we will get to 3-4% economic growth. The way we'll do it is by giving a pay raise to ordinary working class Americans, not a handout to those who are investing.
Absolutely. I was actually going to ask you about Stephanie Kelton because I saw you again in DC last month at the economic conference with Bernard and Pavlina and all those amazing people.
Yeah.
So you've kind of touched on some aspects of MMT in the past. How do you feel about MMT? Is it something you embrace or?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a complicated name for a very simple idea, and the simple idea is that Democrats shouldn't be about austerity politics. We shouldn't be so focused on just deficits. What we should be focused on is economic growth, and the rationale is simple. It's that right now the big threat isn't inflation. Inflation is at a low rate. The big threat for our economy is how to create jobs that pay well. You can get a service job, but that's not going to pay for your housing, often for your education and your health care. So how do we get good paying jobs in this economy? And Stephanie's point, and Krugman, is that we should give the money to the middle class, people who actually will spend that money in their communities. That will create new jobs. That will help raise wages. And their second point is that we need to invest in apprenticeships, in vocational training, in public-private partnerships for the new jobs. That's how we're going to grow the economy. So it's the debate in the Democratic side is, do we just attack Trump's plan and say it's going to explode the deficit, or do we have a vision for Medicare for all, for investment in apprenticeships, for investment in vocational education, for investment in new tech jobs, for giving everyone a pay raise through the earned income tax credit, and put forth our own vision? Stephanie would say we should put forth our own vision. And Robert Reich would say we should put forth our own vision. And certainly I should do that. I believe that.
Okay, awesome. We also talk about a Green New Deal, because we believe everyone should have the opportunity to work. How do you feel about that? Is that something you are passionate about?
Absolutely. We need to have massive investments in infrastructure that would create new jobs. Should have people learning basic tech skills. Not that everyone has to go work at Facebook or Google, but even auto mechanics are going to need basic technology to be able to change parts that have software embedded in them. Look at what you're doing. Journalists need to understand technology to be able to do interviews. We have to have digital proficiency for the next generation. And we need that kind of investment all across America. Here's the irony with this tax bill. You know, it's going to help. It's going to help the tech companies and others in my district. They're going to get billions of dollars of tax breaks. People who own Google or Apple or Oracle stock, they'll do fine, and other company stock. But what are we doing for people in Paintsville, in Detroit, in Baltimore, in Youngstown? Frankly, all these people that Donald Trump said were forgotten. How are we going to create new skills and new jobs there? That has to be the challenge. And the Democratic Party needs to offer a vision for how we do that.
What do you think? I mean, a lot of us, myself included, are basically fear that the Republicans may as well just congratulate themselves for 2020 because the Democrats are so out of touch that so many people have left the Democratic Party and are refusing to go back.
What do you think we need to do to get those folks back? And let me ask you, who are the types of candidates who you think would inspire them and would get them back?
I think Bernie, absolutely. But I also think someone like Nina Turner, someone like Tulsi, like they actually have a following. They create excitement. Somebody who's not status quo. Somebody like that can invigorate new energy back to the party. But even if it's, if it's someone like Warren or someone, they need to adopt a more progressive platform. Right now, with the way that Tom Perez is, I mean, we were told things were going to change, and there's nothing that's changed. So what do you think that we can do to, I mean, I Dem exited. There's millions of me. So what can the Democrats do as a way to invite people back in? What can they do to inspire us to go back and give them another chance?
Well, I appreciate that. I start with the premise that the Democrats need to earn people's votes back. I know there was all this blaming of people saying, oh, they voted third party, and if not, the Democrats would have won. But since when are you entitled to votes? I mean, if people aren't voting for you, you've got to do a better job giving your vision, right? I mean, think of a business. If Apple Computers said, well, we're not selling any iPhones because they're buying another iPhone, they won't say, well, those dumb consumers, they should buy an iPhone. Why aren't they buying an iPhone? They'd say, well, what do we need to do to build a better iPhone, right? So the Democratic Party, if people aren't voting for us, if they're voting for a third party, we got to say, well, why is that? What can we do to give them a reason to vote for us? And I think that is having a clear, simple, bold message. The Democratic Party should stand for not getting into foreign interventions and wars overseas. I was opposed to the war in Iraq, the escalation in Afghanistan, the war in Libya. I was opposed to the overthrow and the role we played in Ukraine and the interventionist posture we had in Syria. And even though I think Assad's a terrible dictator in person, I don't think we should have facilitated regime change without looking at the consequences. So one is restraint in foreign policy. Two is a sense that Medicare for all and debt-free college are things that are going to grow our economy. They're not just morally right, but they also will lead to increase in wages as insurance costs come down, will make our companies more competitive, and they will have a greater workforce that has a college degree. Look at South Korea's economy. Over 50% of folks there have college education, and they don't have to go into debt to do it. I know this firsthand. I had to take out a lot of loans, over $100,000 to go to school. I've been one of the fortunate ones who life has been kind to me, but there are a lot of people who remain in debt for most of their adult lives. And so we've got to address that. We've got to have a real vision for apprenticeships and revitalizing communities and giving people a sense of hope of the 21st century, of what their life can be in places that have been left out, and dealing with the income inequality. And finally, we need to have a vision for America, a sense that we have a common purpose in a 21st century a vision of America that's optimistic, that's positive, that has a place for everyone, whether they're in rural America, whether they're in a predominantly minority community, or whether they're in Silicon Valley. What is our hopeful vision about what we want a multicultural, multiracial, gender equal democracy to look like? And so I think that it's, we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. It makes me feel better that people like you are fighting for us because you get it. You say what we're thinking. We need people like you to fight for us because you guys have, those seats on the floor. We just stand there with our picket signs, and there's only so much we can do.
Well, I'd say today people outside have as big a voice, if not a bigger voice, than those of us in the chambers. Maybe I'll end with this. I was on the floor of the House today, and I tweeted out about how it felt like being in the House of Lords. We had protesters there being whisked away, chanting shame and lies. And one woman's story struck me, a 26-year-old who talked about having stomach paralysis and how the cuts in Medicare would mean that she wouldn't have an opportunity to get basic health care. These decisions have real consequences. And the people, at some point, it reminds me of that Les Mis song. Do you hear the people sing? At some point, the people in this country are going to demand change and throw out a governing class that is not in touch. And I think those of us in Congress have to continue to remember that anger, frustration, that people have outside about the country not working. We got to be optimistic. We need to have a positive vision, but one that's really going to bring fundamental change.
Absolutely. That is awesome. I was going to ask you to inspire people with your last statement, people who feel defeated, and I don't have to ask you that now. So I know you do have a meeting to get to, but I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'd love to have you back anytime. And thank you so much for fighting for us.
Thank you for what you're doing. You're really fighting, and you're making a huge difference. And you should know that your voice is being heard in Congress by a lot of us, particularly in the Progressive Caucus. And I'm hopeful we're going to get new members in there next year. So what you're doing makes a huge difference. Don't underestimate your work in building a much better democracy. So thank you to you. Thank you to all your followers. You're many, many followers. You got more followers than I do. So you're doing something.
Well, Real Progressives does, not me personally.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Happy
Take
holidays.
care. You too. Bye-bye.